How does a small town boy from southern Indiana end up going to art school in Georgia, hanging out with Dan Marino and Aerosmith in South Florida, and then becoming a meteorologist and storm chaser in Oklahoma? Find out on this latest episode of the GeoTrek podcast with Tulsa, Oklahoma meteorologist Michael Seger. This podcast is relevant to young professionals making career decisions and trying to figure out what path to take, particularly if they have an interest in weather and climate. We also touch on some valuable perspectives about extreme weather communication, as well as precautions you can take to protect yourself if you live in tornado country. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Hal, host of the GeoTrek podcast. Here we are at podcast episode number 65, and we're so thankful to have you along for the ride. GeoTrek investigates the impact of extreme weather and natural disasters on individuals and communities. Our goal is to help you improve your decision-making, risk assessment, and communication related to extreme events so you can take action to make yourself, your family, and your community more resilient. Hey, before we get into this podcast, we have a quick favor to ask of you. We'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Your subscription helps us mark professional progress, which ensures many more episodes of the GeoTrek podcast in the future. Now let's get to know this week's guest a little bit better. Michael Seger is the Monday to Friday morning meteorologist at 2 News Oklahoma in Tulsa. He forecasts, produces, and presents the on-air weather segments on 2 News Oklahoma Today. During severe weather, he takes off the suit and goes into chase mode, becoming the lead meteorologist in the field, chasing severe weather and tornadoes that may affect his coverage area. I met Michael at the National Storm Chaser Summit near Oklahoma City the first weekend in February. We recorded this podcast live from the summit. Here we are at the National Storm Chaser Summit in Midwest City, Oklahoma, very close to Oklahoma City. I'm with Michael Seger, broadcast meteorologist from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Michael, thank you so much for taking time to come on the GeoTrek podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
This has been an amazing conference. Have you had a good conference so far?
It has been amazing, and the content we've been seeing is fantastic, but what's even better yet is just, seeing all the people, all the chasers, and, some of what you see out on the plains every spring and having a chance to catch up again after the winter.
It's really nice post-COVID, too, to have these conferences and workshops in person, right? You get the relationship side of it, not just the meteorology.
Absolutely, and that's the big thing. I had somebody ask me yesterday, because I do have a meteorology background, so a lot of the content that is being shown, I already know. He's like, so what are you doing here? And I said, well, I love chasing, and I just, the people, these are the people that think like me and have that passion for weather and for severe storms, and it's just great being here.
Yeah, that's right. The community is really amazing.
Absolutely.
Michael, I wanted to start with you. I know for a lot of people that got into meteorology, they were interested in it as a kid, or there was a triggering storm. I mean, going back for you, how long were you interested in meteorology, and what was that like as a kid growing up?
I originally had a fear of lightning and tornadoes. I can remember when I was very, very young. I used to have nightmares, and this might sound crazy, but I used to have nightmares of lightning bolts that would not flash, but they were just in the sky, and the whole shape and everything used to give me a fear, and I would have nightmares of tornadoes coming and hitting our house, and that fear, though, over time became a curiosity.
Okay.
And I grew up in a very small town in southern Indiana, Du Bois, Indiana. It's kind of between Evansville, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky, if anybody's familiar. And yeah, I think to this day, it's still Indiana's largest tornado outbreak, June 2nd, 1990. And I remember that day vividly. We were in the basement of our house watching the local television. And as we're down there and the local meteorologists are tracking the storm, I'm addicted, right away. I'm watching the storm on radar with the meteorologists, and yeah. We had little windows. We were in the basement of our house, but we had little windows, kind of at the top of the ceiling, and I wanted to see what was going on.
Yeah, you're following it on TV, but you want to peek out the window,
yes.
See what's going on.
Yes, and my grandparents, as my dad's parents at the time, they didn't have a basement, so they actually came over to our house, and my grandfather and dad went outside, and can I go outside on the front porch, and I want to take a look.
This is during the event?
This is during the event, and the storm's still, many miles away, and we went outside, and that was the very first time, you didn't realize at the time, that I saw a massive supercell that was producing a lot of lightning, and it missed us to the north, but it had a long track tornado on it, and went from southern Illinois all the way across southern Indiana.
Man, so it was close enough that you could see it from your porch.
You could see the supercell from our porch.
Had you ever seen anything like that? I mean, these rotating thunderstorms, they're kind of independent. They're so, in a way, artistic and beautiful, but very dangerous.
Yeah, and, I didn't know it at the time what I was looking at. To me, if it had lightning and thunder, it was just a thunderstorm. I didn't understand at the time the differences and types of storms and storm structure. And so I totally was clueless at the time. I'm 13 years old,
sure,
what I'm actually looking at. But that memory will stick with me. And then I can remember the town of Petersburg, Indiana, was hit very hard.
How far was that from where you lived?
Petersburg is probably, I'm trying to think from where I grew up. By the way, the crow flies 20 miles or something or so. Pretty much due west, and went through town with my dad after they had opened it back up, but obviously the destruction is still there, and that was the first time that I had seen F4 tornado damage.
So this is like right after the event. You drive through
a couple of weeks or so.
Okay,
yeah,
but
couple
there's
weeks
still,
but there's still like you got brick homes where the walls are gone, and these are brick homes.
And an EF4 tornado, weeks later, you're still going to see a lot of that damage, right?
Exactly. And
what was that like? I mean, do you recall like memories of like driving through the town? And
yes.
Was it what you expected, or was it just like, whoa?
I didn't know what to expect, really. I don't remember, at least I don't remember knowing what to expect, but I do remember seeing the images, and I can still visualize it in my head.
It's shocking.
And at 13 years old, you're like, holy cow.
Yeah, you didn't know Mother Nature could do that, right?
Yeah, and that was pretty much the sparking point of this curiosity, which was originally a fear, to just almost obsessed with weather. I wanted to get all the books. I want to, any videos out there. I wanted to
learn everything you could to know, like, how does Mother Nature work? How does the atmosphere work?
Like, how does nature produce that much power to cause that much destruction?
Wow, and so personal when it hits the area where you grew up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Michael, walk us through then. You finish high school, and now all of a sudden, like, okay, what are you going to do after that? I mean, how did your interest in meteorology evolve through those years?
So I didn't go into meteorology right after high school. I had a debate. What I was going to do, was I going to do meteorology, was I going to do art? Because I have an art background. I was always good at drawing, and I took a lot of art classes through high school. I ended up getting a scholarship to art school. And being from a small town, and if I felt like this was an opportunity to do something different. And I got a scholarship to do it, so I took a scholarship to the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you were thinking different part of the country,
different experience,
and you're going to really focus on this love you have of art.
Yes, and I always thought I had thought about doing weather, but I've also and it's crazy now that I'm doing broadcast meteorology, but I was extremely shy and introverted, and TV at that time, like, there's no way I can get in front of a camera.
I'm not going to be on a camera in front of all those people.
Yeah, exactly.
So you like dove really into art. I mean, so I'm curious though, like, what were your undergrad years like? I mean, how did you develop as an artist?
I really enjoyed it. I majored in computer art. That was the degree at the time. This would be, so I graduated high school in 1995. At the time, that was like computer animation, your Toy Story kind of thing.
Yeah, just coming out.
Was coming out, and that's kind of what this degree was involved in. Plus, a lot of special effects. Some of my classmates have gone on to work for these big companies in Hollywood and help make some of these amazing
animation
movies.
And stuff. Yeah.
And but me, I realized as I'm getting later in my years, I'm really getting involved with it. While I thought it was really cool, it is painstakingly time-consuming, and I didn't know if I had the patience to.
Very like detail-oriented.
It's detail-oriented, and it's to make those animations and make those computer animations. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of sitting in front of a computer. Yeah,
that's right. It has become what used to be maybe drawing on pencil and paper now is all computerized, right?
Yeah, and I still enjoyed it, but there was a part of me that was like, I don't know if I want to do this as
like
a career,
long-term profession.
A long-term profession, yeah.
So how did you transition then from your background in art and that academic training into meteorology?
So again, it's kind of a long story, and I ended up graduating from SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, in 1999. I did look for jobs. I wasn't having much success, but I don't think I really had the passion for it, to be honest. I look back, at the time I did not
have that fire, like I need to get a job in this field.
Yeah, exactly. And I stayed in Savannah for a year. I had a good friend of mine. We actually tried to do some freelance work in Savannah, which we did a little bit, but it wasn't enough to make a living. You know, it was a struggle.
Yeah.
And so I just had this idea, like I want to move to Florida. Weather is not even an idea right now.
So you're like in your low 20s, you have this undergrad degree in art, and you're going to Florida.
And I'm like, I'm just gonna, I was actually starting to feel almost kind of down, and like here I went, and it's a very, that school is very high rated, and and like here I am, I'm graduating, it's almost a year past, and I don't have a job, and so like I'm getting a little down on myself, and so I just felt like I needed to change. Long story short, I went down for a job interview in Miami, and it was supposed to be some sort of sports marketing thing, and I was just trying anything, you know, and but it wasn't anything what I thought it was going to be. And I talked to my parents that night, and like, just check the paper, see what's in there, and and there was this job opening for a doorman at a resort, Fort Lauderdale Beach.
Okay.
And I'm like, that might be kind of fun.
Meet a lot of interesting people.
And I think that would be something different. You're on the beach. Like, I think I'm going to check this out. So I called the number there on the classified ad, and went over to the building, which was downtown Fort Lauderdale, where they were located. The resort wasn't there, but that's where the company that ran the front door of the resort was. And then they set up an interview that afternoon for me to go over and talk to some of the managers over there. But I had to come back for a second interview to like meet the GM of the hotel, because if you're a doorman, you're the first person the guests meet.
You need to have like great people skills.
You have to. They want the right people up front. And so I did that, and they offered me the job. And I was like, I'm moving to Fort Lauderdale.
No, wait, so this is amazing. So you're going to Fort Lauderdale, you got the job, you're going to be a doorman.
I'm going to be a doorman.
Yeah, and this is amazing. I mean, who knows who you'll meet, right?
No, I have one thing I regret. I worked there for over 2.5 years. I wish I would have kept a journal, because I met so many celebrities coming in and out of that door, because it was an upscale, high-end resort.
Well, in South Florida, it's kind of like LA, right? All these people.
I mean, just Dan Marino would come up there every once in a while. We had, oh my gosh, I talked for 15 minutes with Aerosmith out the front there. When they come in the concert, to play Fort Lauderdale, they stayed there. And it was just. I wish I would have kept the journal. I have and there's a lot of stuff I forgot, but it was such a cool job. Yeah,
well, that's amazing too. And like, your people skills are so sharp, so that probably refined, right? You're like just used to talking to anybody, right?
Well, I think that helped me to do what I'm doing now, because I was such a shy and introverted kid, and I still am in a way. I'm not. I have no problem talking to you. I'm very comfortable, but I still am in a way, and some people are surprised to hear that, because I work in television.
Yeah.
But I really believe I needed that to help give me some confidence as far as talking to people. This idea of being in the public eye too.
Sure.
And I really think that helped me for this next step.
Wow. So, I mean, and that's amazing. Like, what an opportunity. You're there in again, another area of the country. You're doing something so different, but really developing professionally and personally, even though you might not have known it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was just it was 2 years and 7 months that I spent there. Yeah. And, I had an apartment, a cheap apartment. It was kind of an older building, basically right on the beach in Fort Lauderdale. So if I worked the morning shift, and our shifts went from 7 to 3, my drive to go to work was along A1A, Fort Lauderdale, and the sun's coming up over the over the ocean.
I'm thinking of Vanilla Ice,
A1A, yeah, that's exactly right.
No, it's South Florida is just so iconic and beautiful, and just But to live there and to be there. So great. I'm wondering, how does a doorman at a hotel resort in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, become a broadcast meteorologist in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Like, how does this happen?
Yeah. So after a while, working there at the resort, I realized that, okay, I have this interest in weather. I have not done anything with it. And, being on the East Coast, being in Savannah and Fort Lauderdale, I watched a lot of tropical systems come through. I had to evacuate twice when I was in Savannah from 2 hurricanes. Been through some tropical storms and some minimal hurricanes. But, I loved tracking those tropical waves across. And so I had that interest. And then growing up in the Midwest, I had the severe weather aspect of it. And I just could not get weather out of my head. It was something, going back to we just talked about as a kid, that I just was fascinated with it. And so I realized, I'm getting into my mid-20s. I'm like, if I want to do this, I better do it now.
Yeah. And
so I started looking at going to school. I looked at University of Miami, and I had no idea the University of Miami was a private school.
Yeah.
And so I toured the campus and met some of the department there. And because of my transfer credits, it would have taken me about 3 years to get the degree there. And that was nice. When I started looking at schools,
sure.
I wasn't going to have to do the whole 4-year
yeah.
degree because of transfer credits. But I looked at how much money it was going to cost me. I'm just like, I can't do this.
Yeah, it's private tuition. It's
private
pretty pricey.
Tuition, and I don't want to be 6 figures in debt when I finish. So I started looking again, and my now sister-in-law, at the time it was just my brother's girlfriend, was a basketball player at Valparaiso University in Valparaiso, Indiana.
Okay.
And she was telling me, hey, take a look at Valpo.
Yeah.
They've got a program there. It's not, at the time, not extremely well known, but
sure.
but they've got a pretty solid program there. It's up and coming, and so I made an appointment to go visit, and I loved it. It was a smaller environment. I felt like, and which for me being somewhat introverted, and I felt like I could do more there than if I'm in a crowd of people and could get lost.
And back in your home state of Indiana, where you
back in my home state, opposite end of the state from where I grew up, but back in my home state. And if I told myself if I got accepted, I was going to do it. Now it's also a private school, not as expensive as Miami, but I was going to be a little less in debt.
Sure. Yeah.
And it just felt like it was the right fit. And plus with the transfer credits, I could do it in 2 years in a summer session, and they had a broadcast meteorology degree as well.
Sure.
So I want to point that out too, because I figured if I was going to do it, I was going to do the broadcast route.
Yeah, so it seemed like everything aligned. You could be closer to your brother and your future sister-in-law, right? Because they were there in that area. So it seemed like things aligned personally, and then you really liked the program and went for it, huh?
Yeah, it's basically what happened. And I can remember, I got accepted, and I was like, I'm doing it. And my cousin at the time lived in West Palm Beach, and so when I was moving back to go to school, he rode with me from West Palm Beach just to go visit some family. Sure. And I remember we're driving along, and I'm telling him, like, Troy, like, what am I doing? I'm moving to northern Indiana where it's cold in the winter, and I'm going to leave all this
cold and cloudy, leaving the palm trees behind. Does anyone need a surfboard for sale? Scuba gear, we'll need this.
Like, what am I doing?
Man, but I imagine getting on campus, getting in that environment, taking those first classes, you're like, wait, this is where I'm meant to be.
I was so pumped. And it was kind of weird. Now I look back at it and it wasn't. But at the time, when you're in your mid-20s and you're going to these classes with some 18-year-olds.
Sure. You feel a lot older,
You feel older. Yeah, you're like, oh, man, I'm the old guy on campus. I'm that guy, But it worked out.
Man, that's really cool. So, and then obviously you're back in a part of the country where severe weather becomes more of an issue. Actually, northern Indiana, even lake effect snow in the wintertime, and then you're dealing with your tornado threat, hail threat. You're not in hurricane country anymore. So, and then how did that work? So you're at Valpo, and then now you're in Tulsa. Was that your first job, Tulsa, or did you work other places?
It was not my first job. So I had some great opportunities while I was at Valpo. One of the other reasons why I went there was they had a storm chase team.
Oh, okay.
A student storm chase team.
Oh, awesome.
And so they had a program to basically it was a class. You go out for 10 or 11 days, depending on how the weather pattern worked out, and the students do the forecasting.
That's awesome.
And they pick the target area, and obviously we have a professor or two there to kind of help guide us along. But that was my first storm chasing experience, and that was one of the big reasons why I went there. And the other reason why is they have a great relationship with WGN and Tom Skilling in Chicago.
Oh, okay, great.
And so my last semester there, I interned at WGN. So 2 days out of the week, I was driving into downtown Chicago to WGN to intern there.
So that's great. You have that connection with the Chicago market. And then you're centered there in the upper Midwest where you can get easily out to Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, a lot of these areas where the severe storms fire, right?
Yeah. We didn't do a whole lot of chasing. I can remember we did go out on some local events like across northern Indiana.
Yeah.
But during school, unless you're there in the summer, our season there is a little bit later, so it's kind of out of school.
Sure.
Unless you're there for the summer. But that's kind of what really got that fascinating. But I never knew. You're going back to your question. How did I end up in Tulsa? You don't really know where you're going to go. You
get the degree, and
you get the degree, and you're just trying to find a job.
Sure.
And it's not that so much of the case now, but it definitely was back then. When you graduate and you want to go into broadcast meteorology, you're going to go to a small market.
Sure.
You're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
And you basically just kind of earn your keep, and then you try to move up.
Yeah, sure. I've heard that. You kind of start at a small market, maybe not primetime shifts even, just doing what you can, getting your foot in the door, showing your potential, and then things start improving from there.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So here we are at a Storm Chaser Summit. I know your passion is for the meteorology and getting out there. Do you get out a lot, and do some chasing?
Yes, and so the fortunate thing for me is my first job brought me to North Texas, Denison, Texas. We covered southern Oklahoma and North Texas, and I sent out so many applications across the country, and the only one to call me back was K10 Television in Denison, Texas, and I was like, yes.
Well, that's. And for our listeners,
because you could have Tornado Alley.
Yeah, right. You could have ended up in New Hampshire or Maine or California or wherever.
I sent stuff to Oregon, to upstate New York,
and here you are in Tornado Alley.
And here I am in Tornado Alley.
Yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh,
right on the Texas-Oklahoma border, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for a better.
It was perfect.
Yeah. Wow. So how long were you there along the Red River area?
So I worked there for 2 years and 7 months.
Oh, great.
I had a 3-year contract, but I was able to get out a little early. Because of the opportunity that came up in Tulsa. So I'd been 2005 to April 2008 is when I was in Denison.
And what was
Texas.
it like moving and forecasting in Tornado Alley?
I absolutely loved it. It could be, especially early on, a little intimidating, especially when we'd have some of these severe weather events.
Sure.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to be on top of this,
Yeah.
And I didn't have a chance to do a whole lot of chasing my first couple of years. I mostly stuck to being in the studio. I did get out for my first tornado was April 21st in 2007. So when my storm chasing days with Valpo, I never saw a tornado.
Yeah.
But that was just it happened to fall on a Saturday. Wasn't going to affect our viewing area locally, and I went out to Texas Panhandle and got a tornado there, so I had a chance to do some chasing.
Michael, is it me or are people in general in Tornado Alley very well educated? I've been in grocery stores and heard grandmas being like, "Yeah, I don't know if there's enough wind shear to," and I'm like, they're talking about this stuff very knowledgeable just in the grocery store.
Yeah, and I think that I've found in my experience they are more knowledgeable here than you might see in other parts of the country, because it is something that I have no problem talking about wind shear when I'm on the air, the ingredients we need for storms. I want to educate in a way. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I want to educate people too, in the same sense that so they understand. And I think just it's one of those situations. The more you know, the better you're off.
Sure. Yeah, information really is power to help you, in this case, really make life or death decisions for a lot of the listeners. I mean, if you live in tornado country, sometimes you really have to be underground to survive. It's not even enough just to stay home, right?
Right.
This isn't like an ice storm. It could actually kill you in your home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing I always try to explain too, because that is very true. But even on the highest risk days, the odds of a tornado hitting your exact home, your exact spot, are still very small. And I try to explain that because there's a lot of storm anxiety out there.
Sure. People get really worried.
People get really worried, if there's a high risk of tornadoes.
Yeah.
And that really, I used to take a call from a viewer anytime we had any sort of risk of severe weather, and you could just tell they were
really afraid.
Afraid, yeah.
Let's say there's a severe weather outbreak that may happen towards the end of a week, like Thursday, Friday. What does your week look like? Like, how do you start messaging that through the week?
So I love that opportunity because this is my passion. This is what I've always loved. I do my best to explain the threats that are out there, hopefully in a very understandable manner. What we could be looking at timing wise, if it's early on in the week, say it's a Monday and we're expecting something Thursday and Friday, I always, try to be like, this is still 3 days away.
Kind of give them a heads up.
Give them a heads up. It's, we don't know exactly how this is going to evolve. And a lot of times that far in advance, you don't know how the atmosphere will line up. Are we going to deal with supercells? Or are we going to, deal with a linear situation where we've got a line of storms coming through? But then as we get closer in time, the messaging will become a little more clear, a little more precise as far as timing, the types of storms that we'll be looking at, and the threats that may come with it.
So what about the morning of a big outbreak? I mean, everything's looking really prime for Thursday afternoon. You do a lot of morning forecasting. It's Thursday morning. What are you telling your listeners? So
I am telling everybody to be, one of the words I always, and I think a lot of people use this, but be weather aware. One of the situations where you want to have your phone with you, get any alerts possible that may come across, whether you have a NOAA weather radio or, now with cell phones, these alerts will come right to your phone, which is huge. But I always try to explain to people to pay attention to what the weather is doing. Don't, get caught off guard, because that's, I think, the most important thing as far as know the danger that I don't want to say it is a danger, but just be aware. Have
of
that
the threats.
awareness.
Like this could be a real threat this afternoon.
Yes.
Stay connected. However you do that.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Exactly. Everybody's going to have their own way of how they do that, but however you do that, make sure you stay connected to what's going on.
When there's actually, say, a tornado on the ground, there's actually maybe a big hail event, something like that. How are you messaging in that actual when it's really so dynamic and it's actually happening?
If we've got a tornado situation where, and I've had it where I do mornings, and I've had tornado warnings on the ground in the mornings. I try to be as clear as possible. Make sure you are taking your tornado precautions. And here in Oklahoma, a lot of places don't have basements just because of the soil. So interior room, away from windows. If you can get underneath something. That message will come out a lot.
I've heard people say in hurricane country, sometimes a bathroom can be good. You have pipes in the walls. Usually it's more interior.
Yes.
Is that true in tornado country
That
as
is
well?
very, very much. Yeah. If basically you want to put as many walls between you and the outside as possible, because the debris will still come through those outer walls. We've all seen pictures of 2x4s, ending up in somebody's home.
I got you. So if you're in an interior closet, maybe that 2x4 came through the window, but then it didn't get to you.
Yeah, exactly. So it just adds more barriers to slow stuff down from getting to you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Michael, we were talking about some of the social science side of this, both with hurricanes and tornadoes, just how, why people don't evacuate from hurricanes, why they might not shelter in a tornado, and you were bringing up some really interesting comparisons. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we are learning as broadcasters. This has really started to come up over the last few years. I attend other conferences. I've had the fortunate, been very fortunate to listen to Dr. Laura Myers, University of Alabama. She's done a lot of social science research. Really started with the super outbreak in April of 2011 of how the general public basically takes in weather messaging from broadcasters, and we have really tried to work to improve that message to make sure it gets clear and understandable to the public. And we talked a little bit about tornado warnings, like why, if there's a tornado warning, why aren't you taking cover? Why
isn't everyone taking immediate action?
Why
right?
isn't everybody taking immediate action? And I think we have to kind of, as a meteorologist, think about, for example, we're here at the Storm Chaser Summit. Fire alarm goes off. How many people here in our if we're in the conference room, the fire alarm is going, how many of us are like, oh, we need to run outside right
immediately
now?
Stand immediately up and
run outside.
Probably nobody. Gonna look around.
You're gonna look around. You're gonna see, okay, do I see a fire? Is there smoke? You're gonna kind of analyze, what's going on around you to see if you're in an immediate threat. Even though that alarm's going off, you're going to see, okay, what's going on.
You're kind of skeptical because maybe you've seen a lot of false alarms in your life, right?
Yeah, you're like, oh, somebody probably pulled the fire alarm.
Sure.
It's not even it's a false alarm.
Sure.
And so we see that in other aspects of life. It's just human nature. And so I think that that's something that we have to be honest about, and how to approach that, especially if it is a dire situation when you've got a giant tornado on the ground and you're trying to get that message out for people to take cover.
I know historically there were often like really broad warning areas. In fact, they would warn a whole county, right? So maybe a tornado is going to clip the southern edge of the county, but historically they were maybe warning a whole county. So you'd get maybe hundreds of thousands of people are under a tornado warning, but not really in the threat. Are there things that we're trying to do to kind of, detail the geography a little bit closer, maybe with more targeted watches and warnings?
Yes, and so there's a few things that have happened in the past. And we see that now. If anybody that has radar and can plot those warnings there on your radar, you see now we've got polygons. It's not just the whole county that gets alerted. And you mentioned that was a big problem. If you got a fairly large county, but the tornadoes in the far southeastern part, it's just going to clip the far southeastern part of the county. Well, you're alarming 95% of the county that doesn't need to be alarmed. And so there was a lot of false alarm rates, and that does. It kind of goes into what we were talking about, how that. People remember, tornado warning. Yeah,
sure, never happens.
Yeah, never happens.
Too many false alarms.
Yeah, and so they've done. The National Weather Service has done a great job trying to narrow that down. One of the other things that is kind of in the works now, the way warnings are issued, you put the polygon on there, and then when the tornado. The rotation gets toward the end of the polygon, then you issue another warning. And
I got you.
And so what that can do is, like, say you're just outside, but in the path and in the way it's moving, but you're just outside of that tornado warning. But now that next warning is not issued until it's much closer to you.
Right, because you were just outside the previous warning.
Just outside of it. And so now there's work being done that the tornado warning will move with the tornado.
So everyone gets at least, 20, 30 minutes
exactly,
or something.
because you are going to have that little almost like
that little
Frogger
gap.
move,
Yeah.
that little hop, skip, jump that not everybody's going to get the same warning time. Depending on where you are in the warning.
So I have, 15 years with hurricanes. Last year was my first year really doing tornado chasing. I'm with my friend Jeremiah Long. We're up in South Dakota, and we're in a tornado warned storm. It just popped up. We got like 4 minutes to take cover, and all of a sudden the sirens are going off, right? So again, I'm kind of new to tornado chasing. How often will there be like audible sirens? Is that like universal? It happens everywhere in the Midwest and Plains, or is that selective?
Most everywhere in the Midwest and the Plains will have some sort of a siren. So you may get out into some smaller communities that don't, but even most of the smaller communities do.
What do you think about that? I mean, how far are those audible sirens going? Is that giving too broad of a net, or is that good? Is that more targeted?
I think one of the things that is, if you ever watched James Spann out of Birmingham, Alabama, broadcast meteorologist guy, just one of the best out there. And he's kind of brought into light, and I think a lot of us now are trying to bring to light that we have to remember that those are outdoor warnings. They're not meant for you to hear on the inside to give you warning. And so they're great if you're outside.
Someone's on a tractor, maybe don't have their smartphone, they're just out working in the field, and all of a sudden there's a tornado siren.
Yeah, and and now, especially in the day and age of with how we have phones and cell networks and stuff like that, we can get even better ways to get warnings. But I'll hear, and you'll hear like, oh, the sirens didn't go off, it's great, for what it was, back when they, in the 60s and 70s. But now with new technology, use that new technology to get your alerts and warnings in. And
it's more targeted, right? Would you say, like your cell phone map, your whatever watch warning you're going to pull up from the National Weather Service?
And different communities will have different reasons to sound the alarms.
Sure.
Obviously for tornado warnings, but say we have a high-end severe storm, 80 plus mile an hour winds. For some communities that's a threshold to sound the alarms.
Gotcha.
And so you're going to have different reasons for those alarms to sound. Sure. And again, it's not meant to be heard inside your home. It's mainly for people that are outside.
What about like people sleeping at night? Like it's a tornado comes through at 4 a.m. Are there does NOAA have watches and warnings that would go off, notifications, things like that?
Yes, there's and I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have any off the top of my head. Our app for our station certainly has an alert system that you can, if you're, no matter where you're listening from, I'm sure your local television station will have some sort of app that can get an alert sent in. And a lot of that's done GPS. So
so it's pretty targeted.
So it's pretty targeted. So if you're in that warning box or severe thunderstorm warning box, that alert will be sent to you.
Michael, this upcoming season, what does it look like for you? Do you think there'll be times where you get out on the plains to do some storm chasing? How does it look?
I think so. And, we had one of the talks yesterday, how the season might play out. And this is one of the things I've been looking at. We're kind of transitioning maybe out of this La Nina pattern. And it may work out that it potentially could give us a fairly active season in the plains. And so my job, and what's really cool about what I get to do, I'm the morning meteorologist that's on the air. But if we do have severe weather locally in eastern Oklahoma, we actually have 2 counties in southeastern Kansas that we cover as well. I am the primary meteorologist out in the field.
Sure.
Chasing the storms.
So you get some field time anyway, just for your local region.
Yeah, just for work related purposes. Yeah. And so I am kind of curious to see how this plays out this season. In my mind, I'm thinking I will be out quite a few times. And then I also like to chase for fun. So I kind of have a range during the week. We cover more eastern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas in the Tulsa television market. But if there's a dry line set up, western Oklahoma, and I don't have to worry about storms coming into our market east, I'll go out and chase it during the week for fun.
Yeah.
I always hope for Friday and Saturday setups like in the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, where I can get out there and just enjoy.
It's accessible if you have a day or two.
If I have it, I can get out there. I can get out there in no time and chase some storms and enjoy a storm chase weekend and come back, and I'm back to work on Monday,
I'm thinking your computer graphics must be amazing with your background in art and computer, right? Because I'm amazed how much time I spend time making graphics, and that's not even my background. You have this academic background in computer-aided design and art, right?
Yeah, and I've never realized that I would actually use it.
It probably helps you quite a bit,
but
right?
It's helped me quite a bit because a lot of the weather graphics, there are a couple companies out there that are kind of dominating the weather graphics market right now, and it's basically what I was doing. A lot of these are 3D software programs that are geared toward weather.
Do you see some graphics sometimes and you're like, I could do a better job of that myself? I mean, do you customize a little bit sometimes?
I mean, some of the systems are the custom to customize it can be a little difficult.
Sure,
it takes a little bit more work.
Gotcha.
They have a lot of preset stuff that's already in there that you can throw in there. But you can have a little fun with it.
Yeah,
and I try to do that when I have time.
Part of art is just having the eye for it too, and knowing what looks good, and that I'd imagine you get some choice in that, how you want to present, right?
Yeah, just where do I want the text to be on this graphic, or just trying to I know I'm going to stand here, so where I'm going to place all this. There is kind of that idea of I want this to look kind of good.
Michael, how can people find you on social media? How can people follow your forecast?
Okay, so I work at KJRH 2 News Oklahoma, Channel 2. KJRH.com is the website for the station. I have Twitter, just Michael Seger. It's spelled like Bob Seger. Seger. So Michaelseger. Just look that up. You'll find me on Twitter. On Instagram, I am M Seger, SegerWX. And then on Facebook, you can just find Michael Seger. And you can find me on Facebook.
Gotcha. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to want to follow you through especially severe weather season. Do you have any last thoughts to leave with our listeners? And when you think about severe weather, especially like storm season, firing in the plains, any last thoughts to leave with our listeners?
I think that if you're listening, you probably have a passion for the weather. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed being here at the summit is just getting to meet other people that share that same passion.
Sure.
And if you are out there and you're listening and you're maybe a little younger and you're not sure if this is a journey you want to take and you're having some uncertainty, just know I also had that at the same time. I went to, when I graduated high school, I didn't even go into this.
Yeah.
And it's never too late to pursue weather if that is your passion.
That's a really good perspective. We might have 22-year-olds out there that are like, I should have gone into weather and I didn't. That's your story, and you pivoted and got into it.
Yeah, it's never too late. And I don't know what the statistics are on it now, but I know it's pretty high, like how many people do not work in their first degree, if that,
That's right. So you can still pivot. A lot of times pivot. There are schools that'll work with older students, right? Like non-traditional students.
Yeah.
Like that.
And it was kind of, in a way, when I was nervous about going back to school because I was older, but when I got there, I felt like this is my second time around. I felt more like, okay, now I know what I need to do.
A lot of times older students, and when I say older, even mid-20s, right? You're more focused. You know what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a better student.
Yeah, exactly. I was, the first time through, I was kind of naive. I was like,
you don't know. You don't have the confidence. Yeah.
I want to, do well, and I was fortunate to do, well that first time around. But at the same time, I was just so naive to what I needed to do after,
Michael, very last question. I have this picture in my head, which may not be true. I picture everybody from Indiana is a basketball fanatic. You're wearing an Oklahoma City Thunder sweatshirt. Yeah. What level of fanatic are you?
I enjoy it. Is so true. Have you ever watched the movie Hoosiers?
Yeah, of course. That's what made me think of it.
And so I'm from a very small town of 500 people in southern Indiana, and basketball, I mean, it just rules in Indiana, and you got the basketball goal there on your barn, and
you can't escape it.
You can't escape
everywhere,
it.
Right?
It's like as soon as you're born, the doctor gives you like, hey, here's your basketball,
So it's really true. See, this is really yet another thing we're learning here.
And there was they used to not have a class system in Indiana. It was all the schools were going for the state tournament. They were all in the same group.
You mean if you're small school,
if
big
you're
school,
small school,
didn't matter.
big school, didn't matter. You were in the same group, and they ended up going to a class system, which I think it has worked. But boy, when they made that switch, everybody's like, no. Even the small towns, they
want to compete.
We want to compete with the big ones.
Man, so it is serious. Huh?
It was such a fun atmosphere. I still enjoy the game of basketball. Being in Oklahoma for so long now, I try to get to a few Thunder games and never played competitively. I could dunk a basketball back in the day. I'm a little too old now. I could shoot pretty good from three. And
I had to ask. I knew you were from Indiana, and I see you wearing the sweatshirt. We've been with Michael Seger here at the National Storm Chaser Summit in Oklahoma City area. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
We're really excited to follow you this severe storm season as well, and just keep updated with what you're seeing in the field, what you're seeing on your forecast from Tulsa, but beyond as well as you travel around the plains.
And I'm assuming you're coming out chasing this spring?
Yeah, I'm going to be out, I think, at least a couple weeks.
Okay, and we'll definitely have to try to catch up if hopefully we cross paths.
For sure. We've been with Michael Seger here on the GeoTrek podcast, recorded live in the Oklahoma City area here in early February. Again, the heart of severe weather season really marched through, I guess, May and June. We'll just have to see how it plays out this year.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Michael, for coming on podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, Michael, that's a lot of great content that we covered here on the podcast. Let's look back at 3 points that really stuck out to me in our conversation. The first is the overall perspective that it's never too late to get involved in science. Michael's unconventional path through an undergrad degree in art, working as a doorman at a hotel in South Florida, and then getting a degree in meteorology in Indiana is proof that taking an unconventional path into professional science work is totally possible. This is a theme we've covered several times on the GeoTrek podcast. You may remember in episode 44, answering career questions from a high school student, I shared a bit about my story, like how I was a baggage handler for an airline when I was 30 years old. Before I turned 40, I had a doctorate in the field of climate science and was flying to Germany to present at a conference. This theme of an unconventional path to science work also stands out in episode 31, Creative Paths to the Sciences at the EVAN conference. In that episode, we hear the story of several scientists that took creative and unconventional paths to arrive where they are today. But perhaps you're 32 years old, you have 2 kids, your finances are super tight, and you're saying, there's no way I could make a career change now. While that might be true for you right now, there still are choices you can make to get more involved in the weather and science community. You could become a Skywarn severe weather spotter, providing critical observations to the National Weather Service during severe weather outbreaks. Or you could become a rain and snow observer, submitting daily observations to the COCO-RAS network, which helps hydrologists forecast floods. Involvement in the weather community is a great opportunity as well. I met Michael at the National Storm Chaser Summit, where participants were a mixture of professionals and hobbyists who all had the same passion for extreme storms. The National Tropical Weather Conference is another amazing community, offering weekly online conferences during hurricane season. You can get involved in that community from the comfort of your own home. So the big picture here is that it's never too late to become involved in the weather community. The second take-home point I thought was really important was Michael's advice to take shelter in the most interior room of your home if you're threatened by a tornado and do not have a storm shelter or basement or a way to get underground. Strong tornadoes can cause exterior walls to fail or even project debris through windows and walls, so the more walls you have between yourself and the outside, the safer you're going to be. Michael helped correct a false perception I had. You can hear in our conversation, I suggested that people need to be underground if they're threatened by strong tornadoes. He helped us understand that because of soil types, not all homes in places like Oklahoma actually have an underground storm shelter or a basement. I had not realized this, so I was thankful for Michael's perspective on this topic. As you can see, a lot of times on the GeoTrek podcast, I'm learning right alongside of our audience and always very thankful for knowledgeable guests like Michael that can help us see more realistically and understand what's really going on there on the ground. Finally, I really liked what Michael shared about staying weather aware when severe weather threatens. He mentioned how tornado sirens were really designed to be an outdoor warning system, whereas today's smartphone technology can provide more precise and targeted warnings. Consider signing up for severe weather notifications from your most trusted weather source to keep you alert if you're in the path of a tornado. I really like what he said as well about improved tornado warning guidelines that will essentially make tornado warnings roll along with the advance of the storm to ensure that people in harm's way will get adequate warning time. I had not known about this before, but I think it's a great advance in the technology. Well, thank you again, Michael, for coming on the GeoTrek podcast. We're really excited to follow you this upcoming storm season. The heart of severe weather season is during the spring in the Plain States and through portions of the Midwest and Southeast. GeoTrek will be providing several more podcasts about severe weather, hail, and tornadoes as we approach the storm season, and also on social media. A lot of our video content will be right there during the heart of this upcoming storm season. A special thanks as well to our GeoTrek marketing and production team, as well as you, our faithful listeners. Like Michael Seger advised, stay weather aware, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast.